James chapter number 4, if you would please. James chapter number 4. And while you're turning, let me just say today has been, as Nathan already alluded, a little bit of a trip down memory lane as we were pulling in the entrance to not the school proper, but yeah, I guess it actually is the school proper. When you turn, come underneath the trees that have kind of grown across the roadway. Many, many years ago, 1991 or 1992, I don't remember which, we pulled in there at literally about 2:30 in the morning because we'd driven all night from early the day prior, all the way from North Carolina, pulling a 40-foot fifth-wheel trailer. Did not know exactly how long it would take us because I'd never been to Miami before. Did not know how easy it would be able to find Circle C Youth Camp, Westwood Christian School, which is where we were told to come. And so we just thought, we'll drive until we get there. And so that's what we did. And we parked about 2:30 with a 40-foot fifth-wheel trailer behind our Ford F-350 pickup truck in that long driveway. I saw a house over there, assumed that was the home of Dr. Gokenauer, who was pastor of the church at the time, and I was too scared to go over and I actually knock on the door at 2:30 in the morning. Wouldn't you be? I mean, how many of you knew Dr. Gokenauer? You don't knock on the door at 2:30 in the morning. But anyway, I love that man dearly. But anyway, about 6 in the morning, he came out. And I opened my eyes as I had him reclined there on the back seat or the front seat of the pickup truck. The kids and my wife are asleep either in the back or in the passenger seat. And that began a wonderful friendship with this place that has continued now all these years. And I'm so thankful for the opportunity to be here. And then our dear sister this evening who ministered playing the glasses or the cups or whatever you want to call them, as well as with the ventriloquist talent that she's given. When I walked in tonight, I said to her, I said, did you happen to know a lady named Marion Rexford? And she grinned from ear to ear. She said, I traveled with Aunt Marion and Uncle Bill. I said, well, we had Aunt Marion and Uncle Bill at my dad's church many, many, many times growing up as a boy. And I said, when I saw those glasses, I thought I recognized them because I believe they're the same ones that Aunt Marion used many years ago and now passed them off to Sister Warner, and she's using them for the glory of God. So this has been an amazing, amazing evening. The family of God's a small thing, is it not? And God is so good, and I appreciate the opportunity so much to be here. Now, we've got a lot to accomplish in a very short amount of time, so I'm going to ask you to do this. Buckle your seat belt securely. Get fastened in, get your airbag ready in case we stop abruptly to make a left or right-hand turn. And you stay with me for the whole ride, and we're going to be done as quickly as possible. And we're going to be here long enough, though, to let the Lord speak to our heart. Now, I want you to turn, if you have not yet done so, to James chapter 4. I hope you've already found that and are holding a finger there or have your Bible open there. I want you to look up at me for just a second. Back in August, I had the opportunity, actually the early part of September, latter part of August, to be out in Portland, Oregon. And I happened to be there all the way through a date that is now infamous on our calendar, and that's the September 11 anniversary. And I realized it had been 16 years since the 9/11 tragedy had occurred in 2001. And so I was just talking on September 11 to a group of high school students at a Christian school out there about the event, and all of a sudden it dawned on me, Brother Mortensen, that these kids, the majority of them to whom I was speaking, were not even alive when 9/11 occurred in 01. And so it stopped me dead in my tracks as I was speaking to them. And so I just began to reflect and share with them things that I'm sure they had maybe seen a little bit of on the news, maybe at a 9/11 anniversary in the 16 years that have transpired since that horrific, fateful day occurred in New York and in Washington, D.C., and in a field outside Shanksville, Pennsylvania. And by the way, I've been to all three locations, all three of them very quickly after the events occurred. In fact, within a month after the 9/11 tragedy, I was actually on the property of the Pentagon, drove right up to the spot, as close as you could possibly to get. And 30 days, 32 days after the event, there was still smoke coming up out of that hole in the E-ring of the United States Pentagon, that place that is the center of our military expertise. And so I was sharing some of these things with the young people. And so what I want to do tonight for just a second is recollect with you for just a few minutes as I endeavor to go a direction that I believe God would have us go for just a few moments this evening. 9/11 is a day I'll never forget. I was in Oregon, happened to be there at the time. When 9/11, 2001 dawned, it was a Tuesday morning, of course, and bright and early that morning, I dropped a gentleman off at the Portland International Airport. He was the sixth speaker of a group of men that we'd had come there to speak at a men's conference. He was the last one still in town, and I had to get him to the airport early that morning, so I dropped him off, helped get his luggage through curbside check-in, said my goodbyes, came back around, got in our Ford F-350 pickup truck, pulled the truck down into drive, was going to drive about 20 minutes from the airport to where our trailer was parked. And I thought I'll listen to early morning news, hit the radio dial. First words I heard that morning came from the lips of our president. Here's what our President George W. Bush said that day. This was a deliberate terrorist act. Now, I confess to you, I did it then, I still do it now. I try to follow the president's schedule every day, that is, knowing where he's going to be, where he's going to be speaking, what he's going to be doing, so I know how to pray for him and how to hold him up before the Lord, and I was doing that at that time, and I thought, no, wait a minute, our president is supposed to be in Florida in an elementary school classroom reading to some children today, so what does he mean this was a deliberate terrorist act? My assumption, incorrectly, was this, that the attack to which he was referring was something occurring outside the United States. But the longer I listened, the more painfully aware I became of the fact he was not talking about something outside the United States. He was talking about something still going on in our own country. I confess to you, friends, I broke the speed limit that day. I put the throttle as far as it would go to the floor and drove that Ford F-350 as fast as it would go. It did not take me 20 minutes to get back to where we had our trailer parked, but I remember pulling in front of the front of our trailer, going inside. My wife had the vacuum cleaner running early that morning. She was doing some vacuuming of the carpet and doing some cleaning. I said, honey, shut the vacuum cleaner down, pull a chair up in front of, and what we had in those days was an 11-inch TV screen that we had there, a little console model television. Pull a chair up in front of it, and I want to turn it on, and we need to watch because America is under attack. For the next 3 hours we watched. And those of you that lived through that experience will remember how the north and south towers of what we now call the World Trade Center complex, Ground Zero it became known as, collapsed to the ground, pancaking floor by floor to the ground. I remember watching that and thinking, this is surreal. This is like a bad B movie. This cannot be happening. But it was. And we were living it as a nation. And then I remember thinking, I need to call a friend of mine who works in downtown New York City. He just called it the city. 25 years, FBI agent. And I picked up my phone and dialed the number, not knowing that on the first ring I would get not him, but his wife. And I said, Darlene, I'm trying to get your husband. Where is he today? And there was a long silence, and then you could hear the kind of sniffles of trying to choke back tears. And she said, he's in the city. And I said, no, Darlene, listen to me. Your husband is a seasoned veteran of all kinds of events. If anybody knows what to do in a tragic situation, he does. I'm sure he's going to be fine. I want to pray with you, but I'm going to get off the phone so in case he tries to call you, he can do so, let you know he's okay. But I'm going to ask you to do something. Would you at least call me? I don't need but 10 seconds for you to tell me when you talk to him how he's doing, or you can have him call me. Either one, it makes no difference. Would you promise me that one of the two of you will call me once you talk to him? She said, I promise. I prayed quickly, hung up. About 30 minutes later, I got the first of 2 phone calls from that family that morning. It came, this first one, from not either the wife or husband. It came from their daughter, Carrie. And Carrie said, Brother Kistler, we've gotten a phone call from someone in the FBI that said they have seen Daddy from a distance in downtown New York after the towers had begun collapsing. We know he's alive. We have not yet spoken to him, but as soon as we do, I promise I'll give you a call. I said, Carrie, thank you so much. Praying for you guys. Hung up. About another 45 minutes passed. I got the second phone call. This time it was from the wife, and Darlene said, Brother Kistler, I just finished literally about a 25-second phone conversation with my husband. He said, look, I'm fine, don't worry about me, but I do not know when I'll be home. She said that's about all he could tell me, and he had to hang up. I said, well, Darlene, thank you. Again, I'm sure your husband's going to be fine, which he was. 3 months after that second phone conversation, I was in the home of that dear couple. And my friend, veteran FBI agent, took out about 150 pictures, many of which he had taken himself, others he'd accumulated from other members of the FBI who had also snapped pictures that day. And he laid them out on a coffee table, and he said, Preacher, I want to go through these with you. And they were pictures taken after this. He said, Dave, when the first plane went into the north tower of the World Trade Center complex, he said it was a beautiful sunshiny day. We assumed incorrectly that it was an accident, that a plane kind of veered off course. Maybe it was a small engine plane. But he said when the second tower was hit, we knew this was not an accident. We were under attack. So he said, I told the men at FBI headquarters, located 6 blocks from what we now call Ground Zero, he said, I told them, get your raid jackets, get your guns. We're going to make our way down to Ground Zero, to the World Trade Center complex, see what we can do to help. He said, to a man, every one of them had left their blue jackets with the yellow letters on the back, FBI. They're called their raid jackets. They had left them in their cars in the automobile parking garage of the FBI. It took about 10 minutes for them to retrieve them. And he said to me, my friend, Dave, that 10-minute retrieval time probably saved every one of our lives. He said, because as we got our jackets on, got our guns holstered, and we made our way down 6 blocks, he said halfway down, the first tower began to collapse. He said, I literally ducked like I'm jumping behind this pulpit. I jumped in behind a doorway of a business to avoid the rush of debris that's coming at me at what seemed like supersonic speed as that building collapsed, and dust and debris from asbestos and from concrete and from carpet and everything else, even, forgive me, remains of human bodies came rushing up the street past me. He said, Dave, once all that was past, and what seemed like an eternity it took for it to die down, he said, I stepped out of the doorway, and in my pocket, he said, I had a little camera that I took out and aimed at the remaining standing tower. And through the dust and debris, he said, I began to take pictures. He said, I want you to look at this one. And he showed me a picture of a man that was jumping from the 104th floor of the standing tower. It looked like he was doing a swan dive off of a diving board. The next picture was of a couple jumping from the 86th floor, and they were holding hands as they fell to their death. And my friend said to me this, Dave, I don't know if they were a married couple. I don't know if they were a dating couple. I don't know if they were boyfriend, girlfriend. I don't know if they were just office mates. And rather than dying alone, they chose to die together. He said, I don't know. But picture after picture he showed me. And then he told me this, and I'm not recommending necessarily that you do it. But he said, Dave, I used to wonder what it would sound like, a body falling that distance. From 82, 84, 86, 104 floors up. Falling that distance all the way to the ground, hitting the ground. He said, I always used to wonder what would that sound like. He said, I thought it would sound like maybe a watermelon hitting the ground and splitting open. He said, trust me, it sounds nothing like that. He said, I heard body after body, some 200 of them that he said, I personally counted. We call them jumpers. They choose to die by falling. He said, I heard their bodies hit the ground one by one. And he said they sound like little mini explosions as they would hit a taxi cab, careen off that onto the pavement, or hit the pavement directly. And then he said to me this, he said, Dave, do you know we can tell how fast the human body is actually falling and at what speed it would be going when it hit the ground? We can calculate that. He said, Dave, they're falling in excess of 140 miles an hour. I said to my friend, that's fast. He said, yes, it is. But it's not so fast that they would die from the fall. He said, what I'm trying to tell you is this. Unless just the sheer shock of the incident caused them to have a heart attack or pass out. He said, what I'm telling you is every one of those 200 people who chose to jump to their death, they were alive and conscious to the point of impact. And I watched my veteran FBI friend weep copious tears down his seasoned cheeks as he described all of this. Preacher, why are you telling us this? Because I have been taken, courtesy of the pastor of the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., to a spot on the second floor of the E-ring, the very penetration point where the jet that flew into the Pentagon came into the building. And I've stood there where they have now a little marker, kind of a plaque that commemorates the 9/11 event. And this is the spot where the nose of the plane came into the building. And I was told by that Pentagon chaplain, Dave, I know you don't know this, which I did not. He said, most of America doesn't know it. But he said, Dave, in the early part of 2001, this building that we began to realize in those days of a brewing terror attack that we were in the United States, he said, we realized this building as the center of our military would be a prime target for terrorists to want to go after. So he said, we began renovating the outer ring. You see, from the inside, the courtyard is there about a 5-acre courtyard. You have the A ring, the B ring, the C ring, the D ring. The E ring is where all your top brass have their offices because there's windows that can see to the outside and see to the city. And he said, we began renovating the E-ring, bringing it up to 2001 code, steel and concrete reinforced walls. But he said, by the time September 11 rolled around, we had only completed one of the 5 sides of the E-ring. That's why it's called a pentagon. It's a 5-sided building. We'd only completed one of the 5 sides. The other 4 sides had not been renovated. They had not been brought up to 2001 code. He said, Dave, listen to me. Want to venture any kind of wild guess at all which one of those 5 walls the terrorists flew the airplane into? He said, the only one that had been steel and concrete reinforced. He said, Dave, our own internal estimates tell us, had they not hit this wall, if they'd hit into the other 4 that had not been brought up to modern code, he said, we believe the plane would have gone through the E-ring, D-ring, C-ring, B-ring, A-ring, through the courtyard in the middle, and possibly a good ways through the other side of the building, igniting fires the whole way through. He said, we believe we could have lost on 9/11 somewhere between 12 to 13, maybe as many as 15,000 of the 26,000 people that work here. He said, as it was, the total number of deaths at this complex, many of them on the airplane, was about 153 people. And then he looked at me and grinned and said this, and I've never forgotten it. He said, Dave, sort of lets you know God's not through with the good old United States of America. But he also said this, is God ever rich in mercy? Is God ever rich in mercy? It could have been a lot worse. And friends, it could have. Do you know God is rich in mercy? Nathan sang a great song tonight, Were It Not for Grace. I can tell you where I'd be. Wandering down some pointless road to nowhere with my salvation up to me. And I know how that would go. And the battles I would face, forever running, but never winning the race. Were it not for grace. And I want you to listen to a verse of Scripture, and I'm going to wrap all this up. James 4, verse 14 says, whereas you know not what shall be on the morrow. For what is your life? Ladies and gentlemen, moms, dads, young people, I want to ask you that question tonight. What is your life? See, I'm talking to some incredible young people. I just walked back and shook hands with some of the most outstanding young people I think I've ever met in my life. Just winsome young people, smiles on their faces. And they're great kids because they're your young people, mom and dad. They're your children. You're their parents or their grandparents. And I'm sincere about that. I love you folks. I want you to know that. But I want to ask you a question tonight that you must answer. What is your life? Well, my life is going to be 70 years worth of pursuit of this world's goods. I'm going to live the good life. If that's what you think life is and that's it, you're missing it. Life is way more than that. By the way, James answers the question here. Whereas you know not what shall be on the morrow, what is your life? Here's the answer. It's a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. Do you know what life is? It's 3 things, folk. Number 1, it is a fragile thing. It is a vapor. Literally, it's a mist. It is a mist. Now, I don't know if any of you saw this on the news today, but there was actually a fire that got started on the top of one of New York's tallest buildings. It's the Trump International Hotel. And as I was watching the video, because my phone is alerted anytime there is something like that happens, and I got an alert earlier this morning, fire at Trump International Hotel. So I went to my phone and ultimately to my computer, trying to see, is it inside the building? Are they evacuating the building? None of that was taking place. It was up somewhere on the very top of the building, but it's incredibly cold in New York. And so as the heat from the fire is coming out the top of the building, it was very quickly extinguished and dealt with without any loss of life or any real damage to speak of. I noticed this. You could not distinguish the smoke from the flame from the mist of the heat coming up created by the fire into the air at the top of Trump Tower on an incredibly cold morning. Mist is created. What was interesting is this. You could see it, and then all of a sudden it'd disappear. I mean, a second or two, you'd see it, and it was gone. I mean, for a second, there was enough substance to the mist, seemingly that you could go up and wrap your arms around it. And then a second or two later, it was totally gone. It had dissipated. Do you know that is exactly what the Bible is describing our life as? It is like a vapor. It looks like there's more to it than there actually is. I mean, 70 years. 75 years, 80, 85. It was in my wife's granddad's situation, 101 years. I mean, that's a long time by earthly standards, but friends, it is a drop in a bucket compared to eternity forever. What is life? It's a fragile thing. Number two, it's not only a vapor, it's a vapor that appears for a little time. Literally, it's a fleeting thing. It's here for a moment and then gone. I had a guy try to help me with that one time. I was talking to a gentleman and I said, I'm trying to get my mind around the concept of eternity compared to the few short years that I may live here on this earth. He said, Dave, think of it like this. I have never found a better illustration to help me or anybody else really understand it. He said, can you imagine a bird flying to any of the beaches in North Carolina, and there's a multiplicity of them, taking its beak and reaching down onto one of the beaches in North Carolina, picking up a single grain of sand, flying from that beach in North Carolina, the 230-some thousand plus miles it is from the surface of the earth to the surface of the moon, depositing that single grain of sand on the surface of the moon, flying back 230,000 plus miles to the same beach in North Carolina, picking up another single grain of sand, returning back 230,000 plus miles, back to the same surface of the moon, depositing another grain of sand, flying back, picking up a third grain of sand. He said, can you imagine if a bird could actually do that, by the time it would take to empty that beach in North Carolina of every single grain of sand, carrying one at a time, then move down through South Carolina, Georgia, down into Florida, around the tip of Florida, up into the Gulf, removing one grain of sand at a time from every beach in the United States of America. Can you imagine how long it would take for a bird to do that and put that sand on the moon? I said it would take forever. He said, bingo. Just remember this. If a bird could accomplish that feat, by the time he was done, eternity would be but 1 second old. Wow. Do you understand, young people? You're going to live somewhere after this life forever. Mom and Dad, do you understand when this life's over, you're going to live somewhere forever. And yet we spend more on our physical life insurance than we have concern about our eternal life insurance. Wow, life down here is so fleeting. What is our life? It's a vapor, it's fragile. Appears for a little time. I mean, it's over and done, it's fleeting. Look at the end of verse 14, and then vanisheth away. Literally, life dissipates, just like the mist. You see it? It's gone. Here's the problem, though. Life here on earth ends, but life does not end. Do you understand this thing we call death? And more I'm realizing my own mortality. By the way, I woke up this morning. I'm not sure what I did last night that caused me to sleep a little funny, but I woke up this morning, my back was stiff, and I realized, wow, I didn't used to have those problems. I do now at almost 60 years of age. But here's the deal. That thing we're all trying to escape, that thing we're all trying to run from, that thing that we're trying to keep ourselves looking like we're not approaching its door, but we are, that thing called death, it is merely, friends, a doorway through which every one of us in this room will step to go one of two directions. Either to heaven or to hell. Death is just a temporary portal through which we step to go to heaven or hell. Here's the thing James is saying. Not only is life fragile and fleeting, he's saying this: life on earth is final. It's final. You say, wait a minute, Brother Dave. Life can't be final. Death is final. No, death is not final, but life on earth is. In this sense, the final chance you get, sir, ma'am, young man, young lady, the final opportunity you have to decide, am I going to accept Jesus and go to heaven? Am I going to reject Him and end up in hell forever? The final opportunity, the last chance you get to make that decision, it ends when you draw your last breath here on earth. There is no second chance in this book that I'm preaching from tonight called the Bible. There is no second chance after death. I would love, and I'll not take time to do it, but I'd love to take you to to the book of Luke chapter 16 and show you a rich man who died. And the Bible says, and in hell, literally, the minute he closed his eyes in death, immediately and in hell, he lifted up his eyes, being, literally the Greek language is already being in torments. And he prays a prayer of mercy. But the answer he's given is, I'm sorry, it's too late. And it is. The final chance you get, the final chance anyone gets to make the most important decision in life ends when they draw their last breath on this earth. Wow. Years ago, I heard a gentleman related either by marriage or distant family relationship, I don't remember which because it's been a while, related to one of America's greatest idols as far as a musician, and I'm talking about Elvis Presley. By the way, I've been to Graceland in Memphis, Tennessee, and I've seen all the messages left there. I've not actually gone through the house, but I've been outside and I've been in the plane that he owned, and I've looked at all the cars he owned, and wow, he had everything in those days this world had to offer. Fame, fortune, everything. And this man said this, who, by the way, is now an evangelist himself and travels and preaches. He said, the day Elvis died, he said, I was not at all right with God. In fact, he said, I was lost as I could be. I was living what I thought was the high life. It was the life Elvis had lived for a long time. But he said Elvis was not dying well, and he wasn't. And he said, I remember walking past Elvis's room. And he said, I remember looking in and seeing Elvis Presley, the idol of the world, sitting on the edge of his bed. I want you to listen to this. He said, with his Bible open. And he said, I was so away from God, not even born again myself. He said, in those days, I didn't even really give much consideration to it, except that he said, what I thought he's doing is this. He's searching for the truth. And evidently he was. Now, these many years later, when Mr. Rick Stanley, the man I'm telling you about, as an evangelist has traveled the world preaching the gospel, he said, and I'm quoting him directly, the only thing I hope, because I was no help to him at that time, the only thing I can hope is that day as he's sitting on the edge of his bed reading his Bible, the only thing I can hope is that he actually found the truth. Because by that evening, Elvis Presley was no more. As far as this life is concerned, as far as his physical body was concerned. When it came to his eternal soul, when that evening Elvis stepped through the doorway called death, his body stayed on this side, but his soul and spirit went into an eternal realm. If he did not know Jesus, he went into a place called hell. If he did know Jesus, he went to heaven. What is our life? It's a fragile thing. It's a fleeting thing. And friends, please hear me. It's a final thing. Final chance you get to decide for Jesus or against Him will occur on this side, the physical life side of that doorway called death. Now with this, I'm done. 3 days ago, Nathan, 2 days ago, I got an email, Nathan got one as well, from a missionary friend of ours in the country of England. In fact, actually my message came, as did Nathan's, not an email, it came in the form of a text to my phone. And it said this, please pray for, and I'm not going to name the name of the family because this service is being live streamed, but it named the name of a family who had been missionaries in the UK for a long time, and their son had died tragically. From what I understand, he was in a foreign country. He was riding on a motorcycle. The brakes gave out on the motorcycle as he and a female passenger on the back of the motorcycle with him were going down a hill. He could not get the vehicle stopped. They crashed into some type of a barrier, guardrail. There were massive internal injuries. To him, he was not wearing a helmet. As I understand it, at least what I was told, in this particular country, you don't have to wear a helmet as a driver. They say you do as a passenger. I think that's what I've heard. He was thrown off of the vehicle. His female passenger survived. She has extensive injuries, but she lived. The young man died. Here's the tragedy, and it's a double one. As far as I know, and by the way, Nathan showed it to me, a picture with him and this young man in the same picture from one of our trips over into the UK. We know this young man. Tragedy number one is he, as far as I know, never trusted Christ as Savior. He declared himself to be an atheist. Tragedy number two was this: his daddy and his mom were missionaries. Now, folks, I want you to listen to me. It's terrible to go to hell from anywhere, but it's doubly terrible to go from a place where you've heard the truth. And tonight you're hearing the truth. And it would be the consummate tragedy of tragedies to say no to Jesus tonight, leave this place, and something happened to you akin to what happened to this young man. He didn't expect it at 33 years of age, I'll promise you. But something happened to you, and you go out into eternity without Jesus Christ.